Lesson number one, don't believe your own bull. I ended up getting pushed out of my first company. These are life and death decisions. You get that wrong, it's all over. I had all these logistics companies, CEOs coming to me asking for my advice. The Uber Transplace deal, those guys met here at our conference. $3 billion acquisition.
Wow.
My first client was Sid Brown, the CEO of NFI. The sale of Greenscreens to Triumph, our initial investors made a 10X.
Well, you ready for me to dial it up?
Let's go.
We are here with Supply Chain Insiders, wrapping up season 1 with managing partner of Cambridge Capital, director of BGSA, Ben Gordon, the man himself. I'm your host, Michael Berg in West Palm Beach. Today, we're going to be talking the future of logistics, the future of the market. We want to dig into your backstory, your origin story. You have an insane story, so remarkable, and it's only fitting that we're going to be having this conversation over a few bottles of rum, Barcello, the Brugal, and Maestro, all for the Dominican Republic. We appreciate the special occasion to drink some rum with you in the Caribbean area. I'm just excited to chat with you today.
Michael, thank you. Great to be with you.
Which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with the $12 then.
Oh, we want
to
to
go from worst to first.
That's probably right. Okay. Barcello Dorado. Just a little taste for Ben.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. How many businesses have you started?
I've started 5 companies. 3 of them were supply chain software companies, and we sold all of them to public companies. 2 of them I still own and run today. Our investment bank, BGSA, that does M&A advisory for logistics and supply chain companies. And then Cambridge Capital, our private equity and growth equity firm that invests in great supply chain companies.
Right.
I had a reason to care about this industry. I grew up with exposure to it.
Is it true that you come from 5 generations of logistics professionals?
Yeah, they didn't call it logistics in the beginning. They called it a guy with a horse and buggy.
Telegram.
Well, or otherwise, but you got to start somewhere. So my grandfather started a truck leasing company in 1948, and his grandfather started a horse and buggy business in New York. But I didn't want to be the guy that had a job because he was related to somebody else.
Amen.
I wanted to do it my way, right?
There you
So I had this idea. This is now 1999. When I worked in my grandfather's truck leasing company, we sat at one point in a little room, smaller than this one. There was a table and some phones, good old-fashioned smile and dial truck brokerage.
Yep.
And the internet is just, starting to take off. In February of '99, we had the first IPO of a B2B exchange. So there was a company called Chemdex.
Okay.
This guy, Dave Perry, 2 years ahead of me at HBS, had figured out how to use the internet to automate the chemical distribution process. Matching buyers and sellers in this industrial market for chemicals.
Okay.
So I looked at it and I thought, what if we could do that in transportation? I mean, one thing that you should know about me is, I will nerd out when
the opportunity presents
when the opportunity presents itself. So I nerded out, and I wrote this 86-page business plan for AMI, the truck leasing company, to describe how to use the internet to automate the truck brokerage business and to scale it up. So I went to my grandfather. I take him through the first 4 pages, and then he stops me, and he says, I got it, it's enough. You don't want to see the rest? There's still 82 more pages. He said, no. I said, well, what do you think of my plan? He said, your plan seems great, but my plan's better.
Oh, okay.
How do you know?
Good, Gramps.
What's your plan, Grandpa? Right. He said, well, I'm selling my company. Maybe I should just go for it. That 86-page plan became the basis for what would become my business plan for Threeplex. So that was really how it all started. Year 1 was intense. I'm still in business school. My co-founder, Tanya, we both almost got kicked out of HBS. By the time of graduation, I'd already raised 2 rounds of capital.
Wow.
We had 30 employees, and we had several major 3PL customers, and things were taking off.
Do you remember how much money you were raising at that time?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, it was probably your first raise, right?
In the beginning, we raised $1 million of basically angel investor money. Then in April of 2000, we raised 15 million.
Wow.
And that was significant because
at that time is
exactly, because that was a month after the market crashed.
Right.
We were really proud that we were able to raise money after the market crashed. And we said, hey, people recognize that we're solving a real problem. This wasn't just a bubble company.
Yeah.
On the one hand, commercially, we got a lot more traction. We ended up picking up a dozen or so additional 3PLs as customers. Built out what was, I believe, an outstanding team, raised another round of capital. When we hired Bob in turn had all these Schneider people that had worked for him in the past.
And Bob was the head of sales at Schneider?
Yeah, so he became our head of sales. Jack Welch always said, A's attract A's and B's attract C's and D's. So we worked really hard to hire A's for that first wave of leadership, and that in turn made it easier to kind of build out from there. Not all stories end in success. Threeplex is a good example of a failure that led to a success after that.
Yes.
So I ended up getting pushed out of my first company. I was CEO in the beginning. The venture guys came in and said, well, we want to put in more money, but we have all these terms and lower valuation. And I, of course, said, well, I think that's going to demotivate the team. So if you're going to do that, maybe you should find another CEO. And they said, actually, we have one. So that was a wake-up call. Went from CEO to chairman and the board, and they brought their guy in. And ultimately sold the business to Maersk after 3 intense years. Getting to an exit that would create some value for the next chapter was a great thing. What Maersk was really excited about, by the way, was not what we were excited about in the beginning.
Oh, what do you mean?
Yeah. We thought we were building this amazing TMS that was super important. And then we happened to hire somebody along the way who said, this is great, but there's this little niche market called drayage.
Yes.
Had you ever heard of it? And at the time, I hadn't. It turns out that at the local bar in Cambridge, there's something called a drayman stout. And a drayman is someone who pulls, and you're gonna love this, a horse and buggy. You see where this goes? Full circle, right? To haul something short distance from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So drayage, all these years later, it's basically just very basic short haul movement of freight, typically from a port to somewhere within 50 miles or less. This guy, Ted, whom we had hired, said, I think you should build a transportation management system for drayage. And I was like, I don't know, who the hell would care about that? But we did. Guess what?
What?
The drayage ended up being the thing that led to the acquisition. That's why Maersk bought the business.
That is hilarious. A wild turn of events, how that happens. That was your first venture. You went on to start 4 more. How long did you wait to start your next company? Instant, okay. Yeah. How did you take some of those learnings and apply it?
Lesson number 1, don't believe your own bullshit. Listen to the customer and make sure you're building what the customer really wants and not just what you as the cocky founder that think you have all the answers wants to build.
Product market fit.
Product market fit. And then look, control your destiny. If you're gonna raise a lot of money, you just have to understand that decision-making changes, and it caused me to, first of all, raise no money for my next 2 businesses, but we raised money with Greenscreens. We also knew that there was a great use of the proceeds, and indeed, our initial investors with us at Greenscreens made a 10x. So, it was good for them and for us.
Awesome.
I had all these logistics companies, CEOs coming to me asking for my advice. It's like, well, they seem to want my advice more than my software, which is what led me to start the advisory business, BGSA. That was the very next one. That was like the month after Threeplex, I started BGSA, and my first client was Sid Brown, the CEO of NFI. He said, I'd like to hire you to run sales and marketing for me at NFI. And I said, I don't know, Sid.
What?
I spent 3 years failing to convince you to buy my software.
Yeah.
It seems like I sucked at sales and marketing. Why would it be a good idea for either of us? He said, well, I admired your tenacity, I admire your drive. I said, okay, well, that's the case. Why don't you be my first client? Because I'm going to start this advisory business. And he did.
As I pour the second, the Brugal Visionaria, what do you think of the Barcello? What do you think?
It's good. And the problem is you told me that it was the $12 one, so it was hard for me to
An
unbiased point of view. But look, we're in Florida. Caribbean rum is an amazing thing, and why not mix it up a little bit?
Cheers to Palm Beach.
Palm Beach is actually important, believe it or not, in the history of logistics. One of the most important people in the history of supply chain is a guy named Henry Flagler. Henry Flagler had the good fortune of being business partners with John Rockefeller, who of course built what at the time was the most valuable company in the world, Standard Oil.
Right.
And then he retired in his 30s, decided to build a railroad connecting the top and bottom of the state of Florida.
Yep.
At the time, the most important part of Florida economically, it was Key West because of the proximity to Cuba. You had Jacksonville, you had Key West. He ended up buying and developing land in multiple places, and one of them was here in Palm Beach. Flagler built his railroad, and 3 times he tried to extend it all the way to Key West, and each time a hurricane would knock out chunks of it along the Keys.
Yep.
And finally, he said, maybe it's not meant to be.
Yeah.
So just a few blocks away from where you and I sit right now was his residence, which today is the Flagler Museum. And you can go there and you can see the private rail car that he used to travel the state. It's really an amazing period piece.
I played basketball. You're an athlete. Still try to get up and down the court sometimes. In the NBA, there's like 400 players, the best athletes in the world. A lot of people think that NBA players are the best athletes in the world. But the best players, like you think LeBron James, Steph Curry, they are heads and shoulders above everyone else. So even though it's a small community, 400 players, that's not a lot of players in the NBA. When you have millions of kids trying to grow up every year, play basketball. You mentioned you have this network of CEOs. It's roughly the same size, 350, 400. What separates the best of the best from everyone else?
There are a lot of things you've got to do right. But if you look at who's the Michael Jordan of logistics, one of the top contenders would be Brad Jacobs.
Yes.
And I had the good fortune of meeting Brad 15 years ago and working with Brad. He was incredibly rigorous and analytical. I had a conversation with him. We went to his house here in Palm Beach, sat outside and talked about the logistics arena. And Brad said was, look, you don't know me. I built 4 companies from nothing to over $1 billion each. The next one's going to be in logistics. Everybody's saying, I got to go talk to Ben. So tell me, what do I need to know? Brad wanted to consolidate the logistics industry. See, it was a ballsy thing, but what makes for a great place to consolidate? You want a market that's large, growing, and fragmented. Truck brokerage was really the best one in terms of those 3 attributes. So then it was a question of, okay, let's go find the right platforms. So my point is, number one, incredibly analytic, great listener, great thinker, and great at synthesizing what mattered most. I think that was a tremendous advantage. He was very good at thinking beyond just what's right in front of you, but also where were things going. So in the beginning, Brad buys Express One. He instantly takes a $10 million EBITDA company and hires all these people and spends all this money on tech and tanks the EBITDA, right? Goes from positive 10 to a large negative number. Why would he do that? Well, Brad said, I'm not building it for this year, I'm building it over the next 5 years. And he lays out a plan for how he's going to get to $3 billion plus, I think maybe $4 billion within 5 years of EBITDA. None of this exists yet. His ability to cause people to focus on not where you were, but where you were going, and then make it a reality was tremendous. And then the third thing was including people, an inclusive style of management. And so think about this. You walk into a company with 5,000 employees, and usually there are a handful of people that are used to making the decisions. So what does Brad do? He would email the entire company and say, all right, tell me what topics you guys want to talk about. He crowdsources an agenda based on what everybody is asking about. Now that's brilliant for several reasons. One, because you get better ideas when you have more inputs. 2, because these people now feel like they're listened to. Like, oh my God, I have direct access and my feedback is all of a sudden a part of the agenda for this. It's very empowering. And then third, there's a systematic process for how that leads to some sort of actions. Charles Barkley was once asked, what he thinks about the end of a basketball game. And he said, well, my view is simple. In the last 10 seconds, somebody's got to have the ball in their hand. It's got to be somebody. It might as well be me.
Yep.
And I'm not going to make all the shots, but if my attitude is might as well be me, I'm going to put myself in a position to succeed.
So who has the killer instinct? Who wants the ball at the end? Who wants to make the critical decision? Who wants to make those gutsy plays?
And sometimes it's easy to let other people make the decisions and to sit back. And sometimes as CEO, you should do that. And that's why Brad Jacobs doesn't come into his meetings and say, all right, I'm going to do all the talking and it's going to be my agenda. No, he's crowdsourced and he's listening. 3 things that Brad was fantastic at. 1, being incredibly systematic from an analytical standpoint. 2, painting a picture of the future. And 3, running an inclusive style of management that brought everybody's ideas together. Those 3 strengths were really critical. So other people would say, well, it was his acquisitions. Oh, well, it was his ability to negotiate. Oh, the ability to manage the street. Sure, all those things helped. But the root cause, in my view, was that leadership approach.
I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about Greenscreens. I think predictive freight pricing is a very interesting technology, and I think it's a problem that a lot of folks have tried to solve, and would love to just hear a little bit about that journey.
The original pricing tool wasn't software. It was the load board.
Yep.
And the original company that did that was called DAT. DAT is so old that, you know what the initials stand for?
Don't know what the initials stand for.
It stands for dial a truck.
Dial a truck. Okay.
Dial a truck. So we're not talking cutting edge technology. People would just pick up the phone and call. Fast forward 15 years, a company called Truck Stop enters the world.
Right.
And they create the first digital load board. So for the first time ever, you could use the internet to match freight with capacity, and that was pretty cool.
Yep.
But the problem was the data in these load boards was only, as they say, garbage in, garbage out. Right. So you don't have the entire market in a load board. You only have whatever is not getting filled at a particular moment in time. Yep. And that's where Greenscreens came in. According to one logistics company that did a study, there was a 20% error rate in the pricing that they got. If you're a truck broker, your ratio of gross revenue to net revenue on average right now is 11 or 12%.
Okay.
And then out of that 11 or 12, maybe you keep a third of that in the form of EBITDA, okay? Right. So if you're 20% off on that price, that means you're gonna be actively pricing at a loss without knowing it an awful lot of the time. Like you'd be better off sleeping in and go to the beach, you know, here in Florida instead of actually booking that load.
Yes.
What if we could get more data, use AI to be able to make better decisions, have a more complete view of the market, and slash that error rate from 20% down like 5x? Wouldn't that be great? And that's what Greenscreens figured out.
Right.
Customers wanted more accurate pricing.
Right.
Status quo wasn't the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Could we use AI to do it better? And the answer was yes.
Wow, that's awesome. And who did you end up selling the business to?
Triumph.
Triumph?
Yeah.
Cheers and congrats on a successful exit.
Thank you.
For Greenscreens. One word answer. Who do you think is the best hire you've ever made?
Don Salvucci-Favier at Greenscreens is a terrific example. It's not because of me that the company was so successful. It's because there was an amazing team. And Dawn as CEO was a critical part of that. She wasn't CEO on day one because product management was what she'd always done, and that was kind of the thing that we needed the most. Right. And I was executive chairman, and I didn't mind taking on more responsibility in other areas along the way. Meanwhile, we were interviewing for what the Greenscreens board members called an iconic CEO. Kind of like things like Sushant, exactly, right? You know, smart, talented, went to a great school, worked at a great tech company, not necessarily in Sushant's case, but you know, maybe dropped out of school to follow the dream. As the founder, you know, in the majority of the company, et cetera. Yes. And that wasn't the case here because our CEO was fantastic at delivering, but wasn't a hype-driven CEO. Not a Silicon Valley, tell the story first and then figure out how to make it true later. That wasn't Dawn. She was an under-promise and over-deliver kind of person. Wasn't the founder, so therefore didn't have, you know, the equity stake that a founder would have. All the VCs that looked at Greenscreens at the time said, oh, this doesn't make any sense, and didn't like it. Certainly that also didn't lead to people saying, let's promote our head of product management to CEO. But what happened after a few months was it was so obvious that she was great at doing her job, great at following through, great at making things happen, and we were getting things done. It was like, listen, the right answer is right here in front of us.
So what do you think of this one?
It's good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like it?
Yeah, I'm feeling it, so.
Feeling it?
A little bit, yeah.
20th annual BGSA conference, where you have somewhere in the 200 to 400 range CEOs and other executives coming through, networking, having a good time. I heard that there are legendary tennis matches going on as well.
Well, they play for pride and the opportunity to play with Wimbledon winners.
Oh, wow.
John Lloyd, for instance.
Yeah.
This will be our 20th annual BGSA supply chain conference. We'll have over 400 CEOs and supply chain leaders here in just over 3 months. It's where the top people in the industry get together to talk about the big issues.
Right.
And big things happen. I mean, the Uber Transplace deal came together at our conference. $3 billion acquisition.
Wow.
Those guys met here. Big deals, big changes happen. A lot of the
big deals still happening in person. We still have that.
Are you going to make a multi-billion-dollar decision over Zoom? You gather the top CEOs and top leaders. You talk about the big issues. There are panels. There's fun stuff like, you know, tennis and golf with all kinds of legends. Mike Tyson was here a couple of years ago for fun.
No kidding.
It's an opportunity for great entrepreneurs to pitch, and whether they win or lose, the fact that they're there is already a huge win because they're telling their story in front of what's now over 400 CEOs and decision makers.
Most of us will never be a CEO. We'll never really be inside of the boardrooms. We will really never be inside some of the conversations that are having amongst executives, CEOs in particular. And I was wondering what you could share about some of the unspoken conversations or actual conversations that are happening at these kinds of conferences that demonstrate some of the power, the autonomy, vision that exists in these types of environments.
At one level, there's this fantastic bird's eye view from top leaders about big decisions. I'm going to give you an example. Last year, the CEOs of Trimble, $20 billion plus public company, and Platform Science announced and did a deal talk with me on their merger. Platform Science essentially was buying the telematics division of Trimble, but Trimble in turn was taking stock and became a 33% owner in the business. So first of all, what an amazing story about how these companies decided to do that.
Right.
Jack and Rob sat with me, and we had a conversation about it. How did it come about? What were the underlying goals? Well, what else did you explore? But then, you asked about what happens behind the scenes. I won't go into the behind the scenes with Trimble and telematics, but let me give you a no-name example. Public company CEO. Externally, he of course was talking about how great everything was and all the things that you have to say for public consumption.
Right.
Then privately, we talked one-on-one. This is during the freight recession, a couple of years ago. And he said, well, I want to ask your advice. We're over-levered. Do we just sell the business for for a tiny amount? Do we go through a restructuring and fire half the people? Do we sell a division so that it's sort of like, the wounded animal that's in the trap and bites off its own legs so the rest of it can run off? What do we do?
Right.
These are life and death decisions for a company, right? You get that wrong, it's all over. And the willingness to have candid discussions about the big issues, which you're never going to have on a stage or in public.
Right.
If you're not brutally honest about the issues, you're never going to solve them. The best CEOs know that, and the best investors and advisors, strive to do that as well. So I think some of the behind-the-scenes conversations you would find staggering in terms of the dramatic changes that people have been willing to consider over the last 2.5 years.
Do all the CEOs subscribe to that formula and it just comes down to who's executing the best, who has the best timing, or maybe luck has a little bit to do with it? But if it is such a simple formula and we have proof points, why is there such a discrepancy between the best of the best?
Not everybody is a student at the game in the same way, and they sometimes are overconfident about their own skills, and there's an inner toughness to it. Not everybody wants to make the tough decisions. Perfect example, this freight recession, the decline in the market was super steep, and you had to do something in order to stay in business in some cases. There are plenty of trucking companies that faced that challenge. Some people were willing to make the cuts, and some people weren't.
Right. Yep, you got to be ready to make that call when the time comes.
Yes.
Who's your team?
I grew up in Philadelphia and I lived in Boston for a long time. So Sixers and Celtics. I'll tell you what I love about the Celtics. I had just actually moved from Boston here around this time. 2006, the Celtics were the worst team in the NBA.
And then 2009?
2007.
2007, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett.
There you go. So they traded for Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett. But it wasn't just that they had stars, they also changed their leadership approach.
Yeah.
It was a unipolar leadership strategy. Paul Pierce, famously, as he called himself, the best player on the worst team. Yeah, they also the truth, right. But best player on the worst team, not a great strategy for success.
Right.
So now, he's got two others. They had a big three. What were they going to do? How are they going to change their leadership strategy? How are they going to adapt to one another? And as the story goes, Kevin Garnett led the team. They went on an exhibition trip to Italy. And they had all these young players, a bunch of rookies. And Kevin personally bought them all these custom-made Italian suits.
Yes.
And he said, if you're going to be champions, you got to feel like champions and you got to look like champions.
Yes.
Imagine being a rookie and, Kevin Garnett does that for you.
Yes.
They went on this trip, they came up with, or maybe it was the coach that came up with the tagline for them that year, which was Ubuntu, an African phrase for we win together.
Yep.
And they all had to learn how to team up. They all had to agree to pass the ball more, accept fewer shots, change your leadership strategy, focus more on defense. And it worked. And sure enough, in 2007-2008 season, they went from worst to first, and they defeated Kobe and the Lakers and won the championships. And what I love about that is they might not have been the most talented team. It might have been, sure, those guys were great, but they didn't have LeBron on the team. They didn't have Kobe on the team.
Yep.
But they changed their leadership strategy. And that kind of adaptability, I think, is such a great lesson.
I have to say, I'm a Laker fan, diehard, grew up in Southern California, so I just have to let the record be known that the Lakers came back and won the championship. I think it was the very next year.
Oh, I don't remember.
Kobe went back-to-back titles with Pau Gasol, but
I forgot that.
all. As a Laker fan, have to say that I love that gesture by Kevin Garnett, and I love that story. You ready for me to dial it up?
Let's go.
Only seems fitting that we have a couple different bottles of rum to sample.
We're in Florida, in Palm Beach. Not like this is the land of retired alcoholics or something, but right, not me certainly.
Have you ever worked like I'm gonna say regular job? Have you ever been a W-2 employee?
Yeah, in the beginning, my first job out of college, I spent 3 years as a strategy consultant in Boston and Paris at CDI, but not since then.
Maybe in one word, what is the most underrated technology in freight logistics right now? Or one sentence.
Telephone.
Telephone.
Believe it or not, you said underrated. I mean, AI is probably the most overrated in some respects, but real in others. The reality is that there's a human component to this that still matters.
Okay.
When I think about, for example, the biggest transactions that for example, the sale of Greenscreens to Triumph.
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's not going to happen by email. It's not going to happen by Zoom.
Right.
In the end, there are a series of high-stakes discussions with CEOs that lead to something important happening or not happening. As much as we all would like to think that we live in a world of automation, sometimes that still matters.
So reverse of that question, is the answer AI, the most overrated tech in logistics?
You made a good point earlier that the internet in '99 is kind of like AI today.
Yeah.
On the one hand, super overhyped. On the other hand, amazing things will come out of it. If you think about the internet in '99, on the one hand, overhyped, and there are all these companies, like the sock puppet and pets.com and these famous flameouts of companies that probably shouldn't have existed that went bankrupt. And of course, there were companies like Global Crossing that raised billions of dollars to build the infrastructure for the internet and then, blew up. And if you're an investor, you lost all your money. On the other hand, number one, there were huge winners like Amazon.
Yep.
And then number two, e-commerce supply chain companies that grew up around that ecosystem. And then number three, if not for all the money that Global Crossing spent building underwater cables, we wouldn't have the same low-cost, global internet networks that exist today. But it's kind of like the joke about the CEO and, his director of marketing said, well, I have bad news, 50% of your marketing is wasted. He said, great, cut the budget in half. You don't know which half.
Yeah.
Right. So sure, there's a lot of overhyped companies that aren't going to make it on the AI side. So yes, for sure, the hype cycle is there. But there are going to be some huge transformative wins that come out of it, just like we saw 26 years ago.
That's insightful. As we crack open our Maestro Reserva dark aromatic toasting, it's our last tasting of the day. What did you think of our Bruegel?
Really good. It was intense. I'm feeling it. I'm not the 21-year-old heavy drinker.
I've been putting less and less ice every round. It's getting more and more intense. For all the little guys out there, all the 3PLs, all the brokers, all the consolidation that's happening, what's the right mindset to go into it if you're in that position?
On the one hand, there's never been a better time to build or scale a company because you've never had more tools and resources at your disposal. If you think about it, the talk in Silicon Valley about who's going to be the first to build a single person billion-dollar company. It's never been easier than it is today. On the other hand, it's never been more intense from a competitive standpoint. If you're not making these moves and your competitors are, you're going to get crushed. It's kind of a Charles Dickens best of times, worst of times for the little guys, you put it. If you're running a small 3PL, you got to have a point of view about what's your competitive advantage. Typically it's one of three things. You're low cost, you're high service, or you've got a niche focus.
Right.
So if it's low cost, you got to figure out how to use technology to automate as much as you can. And it could be other things. It could be offshore labor. It could be other tools. But you really got to figure out, how do I drive my costs down below everybody else? If it's high service, you've got to figure out how to do it better than anybody else. What does that mean? Does it mean that you end up paying more for the person that's the biggest expert in the, say, the pharma sector, so that when you're serving pharma logistics, you've got the right people for that, or that you've got 24/7 access that, so that people can reach you or, solve whatever problem, or that you just go old school and do things like performance guarantees. And if you don't do a certain thing, you give the customer their money back. I mean, whatever it is, you've got to have a service strategy. If you're niche, you're number one in reverse logistics or flatbed or something else, and you're going to do it better than anybody else. But you have to be clear about that. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Right. So you got to be precise about that. John Wooden said it, and probably somebody before him, but that's exactly right, John Wooden. So I think that's number one. Number two is you've got to be prepared to invest in what makes you great. So if the answer is low cost, you got to be prepared to spend money on technology to boost automation, for example. And that's hard because your typical logistics company, it's a low margin business. And much like my story that I shared with you about Threeplex, where a lot of the customers wanted to get their customers to pay for it, sometimes you got to be the one to pay for it. So you've got to be willing to invest behind it. If the strategy is, broad service, it might also involve acquisitions. And it might mean that you go raise a war chest and go buy a series of companies, whether that's on your own or with an equity partner like Cambridge, or by levering up with lots of debt. However you do it, you got to be prepared to put your money where your mouth is. And then I think the third is you have to have an objective self-assessment.
Yep.
Right? I'm repeating myself about believing your own bullshit, right? But you got to know, like, really, where am I? I mean, it's interesting. I learned this with my first company with Threeplex, and I talked to all these mid-sized 3PLs, and at the time, many of them had their own proprietary technology, TMS or otherwise, and they all said, well, we think we're, the best in the industry at this. Everybody can't be the best. Right. So you've got to be able to have an honest self-assessment, and then that leads to the feedback loop. Well, if I'm not really the best in this area, what do I need to do? And it comes back to the three questions around, low cost, high service, or niche. So I think like those are the core things that any CEO, but particularly a CEO of a smaller company, has got to be asking.
Yeah. Cheers also.
Cheers.
Yes, let's try this third one. Oh, wow. I don't know if it's just because I'm putting less ice, but this one's noticeably more.
Yeah, intense.
All right, intense.
Like it.
Yeah. Liking it to the .com era, early 2000s. A lot of companies crashed. Decisions were made at the time that seemed very wise and very sound and very good, and ended up, crashing and burning for the people that were, investing in that type of tech at the time. I'm looking for like, what is your, I guess, like extreme or dramatic take on this wave that we're in now?
I think we've been through 3 waves in the supply chain industry, and we're getting ready for a 4th. So if you think about it, since deregulation, one huge wave was in the 80s, you had this flowering of innovation. You had all these startups, all these truck brokers. Why? Because when pricing was no longer fixed, there was a need, there was an opportunity for companies to say, hey, I could be an intermediary, I could help you solve this volatility. So if you look at it, the organic growth in truck brokerage from 1980 to 2000 was over 20%. Okay, that was the first wave. Second wave was consolidation. 2019, let's say, a lot of M&A, companies like, Echo Global Logistics formed in 2005, made about 20 acquisitions to scale up. Robinson made some acquisitions, of course, XPO, the poster child for acquisitions and consolidation in logistics. So it was really a flourishing of M&A. Then you had the COVID boom and the post-COVID bust. And so here we are now. So you had the surge, and it was great for a year and a half, 2 years, and then it was terrible, and a lot of people fighting for their lives. But we're going to come through this as an industry. So then the question is, what's next?
Yeah.
You are going to see a thinning of the herd. You are going to see the strategy that we just talked about, and companies that have the brutal self-awareness and decide where they are in terms of strategy and put the money where their mouth is. Some of those guys will do great, but a lot of them won't. And those guys will end up, being destroyed, candidly, by those that are willing to not just out-hustle them, but also outthink them.
Right.
This is a critical time for companies to decide, where am I in that? If you have a good business, but you don't take that extra step, it's going to be a good time to sell. Much better to sell into a consolidation than to be left out. early 1900s, there were over 10,000 auto manufacturers.
Whoa.
Like between 1900 and 1930, really like the 1920s in particular.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah, so what happened? Ford and GM bought several, and a bunch of them went broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are we destined to look the same as the auto industry? No, but as they say, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So I think that's coming. You got to ask yourself, am I going to be one of the giants? By definition, very few people can actually get there. So if you can, great. If you can't, look at your alternatives. We all look at the past as a frame of reference. Your average logistics company that says, oh, had I sold in 2021, I could have made all this money. That's the past. It's not coming back. You know, you're a basketball fan. You may appreciate when Rick Pitino became the coach of the Boston Celtics like 2 decades ago. He said, Larry Bird's not coming in through that door. And 2021's not coming in through that door. The right question to ask is, realistically, what's possible in the next 3 to 5 years?
Right.
Because things could be a lot worse. So I think it's a really good time for people to just have an honest self-assessment. Am I willing to make bold investments to try to dominate and be in that 0.0001%? Or maybe now's a good time to sell.
Get in or get out. Win or go home. Are you willing to make bold investments or not? If you're not willing to make bold assessments, you got to get out.
There you go.
I just wanted to ask, because USPS has been losing billions of dollars trying to, keep up with everything. But they have a new strategy, so I've heard, that they're trying to increase their parcel volume and involve themselves more in reverse logistics, and hopes that they can break even within the next year or so, I believe. And I was curious your thoughts on if they're going to be able to compete with, people like FedEx and UPS, and also if you think that they should be privatized.
Sure. Absolutely. Post office is a national asset, and it's not run as a business because it serves a purpose that everybody gets mail delivery, and there's a national interest in being able to provide that. On the other hand, it's crazy that, we're supposed to burn something like $100 billion in the next 10 years of taxpayer money, and that makes no sense. So interestingly, a BGSA client, Louis DeJoy, who built New Breed, sold his business to XPO for about $600 million. One of his best customers, one of his clients along the way, was the U.S. Post Office. So they happened to be doing a search. They hired Heidrick and Struggles or Korn Ferry, one of the big search firms. And guess who they picked to be our Postmaster General? Our buddy Louis. So Louis actually came to our conference a couple of years ago and talked about exactly this issue. And he was transparent about the strategy. Super funny, by the way. He spoke without notes for 40 minutes, but he went into excruciating detail on exactly what the strategy was, quantitative examples of the problems and how he was going to solve it. It's funny, as he put it, he said, our warehouses were so dark and dirty, he said, even the rats had miners' helmets. So you remember that? But Louis had a clear plan. And the plan was that the post office had to be something that was sustainable, because for us as taxpayers, it just makes no sense. And it would be, probably the greatest turnaround of all time in American history if you could take that $100 billion projected loss and turn it into a break even. Louis took several steps in that direction. Number one, taking a more disciplined look at where were they applying resources. For example, parcel makes money in ways that flat mail doesn't in the long run. Flat mail is in steep decline. It's not flat because email is an obvious replacement and has been for a couple of decades. But parcel, we all still get our Amazon shipments and other products, and that matters. So making some strategic shifts to areas that grow makes sense. Then there are also things like cost categories. Does it really make sense? Do you need to deliver 7 days? No. 6 days? No. 5 days? Maybe. If you were running the post office like a business, would you spend as much money delivering in the remote reaches of Alaska as in downtown LA or San Francisco or New York? Of course not, because your cost per delivery is incredibly high, right? And so you have these huge losses because you're doing things that as a business would never make any sense. Running it like a business with some common sense made a hell of a lot of sense. Now, Lewis stepped down a few months ago. His replacement, David Steiner, who was the CEO of Waste Management, who interestingly enough bought one of Brad Jacobs' companies, the United Waste business, right? So just to come full circle, David Steiner is a smart guy. So I'm sure that David Steiner will think like a business leader, just as Louis DeJoy thought like a business leader. But now the question you've asked is, well, what should they do? Look, if I were the Postmaster General, or if I were on the board of or advising the post office, I'd say a couple things. One, for sure, I would set the goal that 100 billion should be zero. There should be a plan for getting that to break even. Two, for sure, I would rationalize the things that don't make sense. Might there be some politically difficult decisions to make? For example, reducing service in remote areas where there are very few people. Yeah, but I mean, guess what? Like, it's all about making trade-offs. Everybody doesn't get everything, and I mean, that's why we're $100 billion of loss, staring us in the face right now. So I think there's some tough decisions to make that I would push for. Third thing that I would do, I'd probably form a like a bipartisan blue ribbon committee that provides some political cover for that. Historically, what happens is people say it's all a great idea, but if it's in my district, then I'm against it. The analogy would be the way military bases were consolidated. They formed a Blue Ribbon Commission, Democrats and Republicans. Inevitably, if the base was in your district, you were going to fight like hell to prevent it from happening, but there would be a process and some political cover for doing that. Well, I think it should be the exact same kind of thought process, and there's an opportunity. And then lastly, there's an opportunity to use technology, supply chain technology, to help make better decisions. And you alluded to things like reverse logistics, and whether it's reverse logistics in returns, or using AI to automate workflow, which of course is a pallet opportunity.
Yes. Shout out pallet.
Shout out to pallet. All of those are the kinds of things that should be on the table. And if I were advising the post office, that's what I'd be doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers to a great conversation.
This is not a $1,200 bottle of wine. This is a $12 bottle of wine. What did I say?
Wine.
No, you got it at 21.
Of expertise and not nepotism, right? Nepo babies. So
Nepo babies.
shout out Nepo babies. Were you a fan of Nepo babies?
We love a Nepo baby.
Yeah.
Let's try this third one. Oh wow, that one's, I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, intense.
I've been putting less and less ice every round,
Yeah.
so it's getting more and more intense.
I'm trying to make him more chilled, Midwestern.
Okay.